Hi everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And when it comes time to buy a new car, it always comes down to what your priorities are. There is no magic bullet car that can be everything to everyone. So if high on your list of priorities you have luxury, you have size, you have capability, you have comfort, well, you're probably looking at the likes of the Mercedes GLS, the Cadillac Escalade, the Lexus LX, or perhaps this brand new 2018 Lincoln Navigator. It's been 10 years since we've seen a new Navigator, and the old version was lagging behind a bit in this full-size luxury SUV class, but now this vehicle has come out swinging. We have some great new features on board. In fact, it made a big enough impression that it just won the Truck of the Year award at the North American International Auto Show. That's a first for Lincoln. But if what I'm about to tell you in this review is sounding just a little bit familiar to, say, that Ford Expedition that I was reviewing a few weeks ago with you on the program, it's for good reason. This and the Expedition share the same platform, they share the same dimensions, the same transmission, and we really liked that new offering from Ford. But if the Expedition is, say, a piece of toast, it's like Lincoln came along and spread a big old dollop of caviar all over the top of it. This is one luxury-filled ride. So we're heading off to British Columbia this weekend for a road trip and a weekend away with our extended family. That means that we've got a lot of stuff on board this thing. Perfect time to check out the new Navigator on a wide open highway and see how this luxurious new offering shakes out this week here on Family Wheels. Well, standard equipment has seen a big boost in the Navigator for 2018. It's impressive, and it better be, because it has a starting price in Canada of $87,650. That's about an $8,000 price jump over the previous Navigator, and that puts its base price at over $27,000 more than a base Expedition. And as tested here with pretty much every additional feature that you can think of, it's just a hair over 100 grand Canadian. But let's quickly look over what separates this from its Ford sibling. The list of standard features on the basic Select trim is impressive. You have leather, genuine wood, and real aluminum inlays, which look slick. 3 zones of climate control, a heated steering wheel, a panorama sunroof, push-button start and remote start, a 12-inch customizable LED instrument cluster in front of the driver, wireless charging bay for your phone, a 10-inch hyper-clear touchscreen that's based on the same Sync 3 infotainment system that we see from Ford, and that means that you also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. You also get a 14-speaker Revel audio sound system as standard, reverse sensing, blind spot monitoring comes standard, and that's a good thing because you have some honking blind spots to deal with, so it's good to have blind spot monitoring just to try and help deal with those problems over each of your shoulders. Also standard, you get a foot-activated liftgate out back, LED headlights and tail lights all around, and then 4-wheel drive comes standard too, along with a whole slew of drive modes from conserve to deep snow to excite, depending on your needs or the mood that you're in. Also standard is a variant of the 3.5-liter EcoBoost engine that's available in the Expedition or the F-150, but it's been turned up to 11 here in the Navigator. It's actually very similar to the twin-turbo high-output version of this engine that you'll find in the rather nutty Ford Raptor, and it puts out the same figures too. 450 horsepower, 510 foot-pounds of torque. It can be a raging bull when you've got it in the most aggressive mode, which is called Excite, but also super smooth and composed, not nearly as loud or in your face as I found the Raptor to be. Just a steady delivery of power for daily cruising. And all this is mated up to the same 10-speed automatic transmission that we see from Ford. You bring this combination together along with a much lighter, all-new aluminum body for 2018, and despite all that madness on tap, we've still averaged 12.5 liters per 100 kilometers in our 1,000 kilometers of driving this vehicle this week. That's exactly the same number as we saw from the Expedition, despite having over 100 horsepower more on tap. Now don't get me wrong, it's no Prius, but considering the sheer size and power of the Navigator, I still found those figures pretty damn impressive. But to get the very most power and economy out of this sport-tuned engine, Lincoln is suggesting that you use a high-octane fuel. However, when I spoke with a local Ford dealer, they suggested it's more of a recommendation than a must. I've used both regular and high-octane fuel this week, and the Navigator seems happy and capable with either of them. Speaking of power, the Navigator also boasts best-in-class towing capacity, 8,400 pounds when it has the available heavy-duty trailer package added to it. But because of all the bells and whistles, that actually falls 800 pounds behind the Expedition, which can tow 9,200 pounds. Now that's still impressive capability, and that comes largely from the fact that it shares a lot of DNA with the F-150 pickup truck. The downside to this is that it's still a truck frame, so it rides a little rougher than I was hoping. Now, as part of the various drive mode functions I was mentioning, the Navigator does have adaptive suspension to help soak up some of those bumps. But even when I've set it to be as plush as it can be, I'm still feeling a little rattled over rough dirt roads or uneven pavement. I wasn't expecting that from this car. It's also a little noisier in here than I was anticipating. Despite additional noise insulation over the Expedition and noise cancellation through the stereo, I'm actually getting higher ratings in our decibel reader test than I saw in the Ford, consistently at 67 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour this week. And I think a big part of that extra highway noise are the optional crossbars that we have installed here on this tester for easily putting on something like a ski box or a bike rack. But good luck ever getting up there to actually get your skis out of this thing. The Navigator stands tall, well taller than me at 6'2", which does make it an effort to climb in and out of this thing. So these power deployable running boards that are available on this reserve trim that I'm driving this week have definitely come in handy, especially for our kid, to haul himself in and out of this thing. But if you do have a parkade or a smaller garage in your daily drive, make sure to check out the Navigator and make sure it's going to fit, because it is rather massive. And that's something that you might lose track of until it comes time to pack yourself into one of those tight parking spots, because the Navigator drives much smaller than it actually is. With responsive steering and power to spare, it doesn't feel like you're driving around a big hulking mass of a machine. But despite this truck's hefty price tag, there are some things missing. Even on this top level reserve trim, I don't have a chrome tipped exhaust in here. I don't have an easy access button for turning the heated steering wheel on and off right on the dash. Instead, you have to wade through various menus to find that. Funny enough, the Expedition does have one of those buttons, and that's something I'm missing here in the Navigator. Other features that are available, but you have to pay more for even on this reserve trim, include safety features like adaptive cruise, lane departure warning, and forward collision mitigation braking. This is a technology that we're now seeing come standard on the Toyota Corolla, for goodness sake, so I'm surprised we don't have it here as standard. Something that's also going to cost you more is the enhanced park assist program for automatically squeezing this thing into tight parking spaces. And you're going to have to pay more for these 30-way adjustable front seats too. But you know what? No matter which trim or packages you choose, I think the Navigator looks really good for 2018. The Navigator adopts the same metal mesh grille as we saw in the new Continental last year. All trims also have these big, meaty 22-inch rims, and the interior is decidedly upscale, a big improvement over the previous generation. I love that warm, real wood inlay rolling right behind the infotainment system screen. The center console has this really cool floating front end to it, looks really chic. Meanwhile, this huge infotainment system screen is the largest Lincoln has ever offered in any of its vehicles, and there are tons of clever storage nooks too. Ford is really good at finding those in its vehicles, and these optional 30-way seats are very comfortable, although I almost feel like they're going a bit too far in terms of adjustability. I mean, you could adjust the amount of support under each of your individual quads. Who needs that? It just creates a big gap in the seats that's prime for filling up with road trip crumbs. You also get massage functions for the two front passengers in the optional seats, but Ford could really learn a lesson or two from Mercedes or Audi on massaging seats. They feel more like aliens probing around than a relaxing afternoon at the spa. I'd also caution that while this leather is very supple and comfortable, it does seem to nick up easily. Even just taking Roger's car seat in and out of this thing, I got a scrape on one of the back seats. So if you're hard on your seats, get some covers or just be very careful. And while we're on the topic of wear and tear, while this piano black plastic that's throughout the cabin looks good, it also seems to get micro scratches in it very easily, even just from wiping up messes. And the cabin still has some cheaper feeling plastics in places too, on the paddle shifters, back around the third row in the trunk area. I've noticed that these kinds of plastics from Ford often don't wear well over time, so I'm just not sure if the Navigator will look quite so crisp and clean and classy after a few years on the road. After all, if you're driving something around this big, chances are you might be doing a bit of chauffeuring, either kids in the back seat, maybe rock stars, neither of whom are particularly well known for taking it easy on things. But in the back end of this thing, you are going to find best-in-class features up the yin-yang back there. Best-in-class second-row legroom, best-in-class third-row legroom, best-in-class cargo volume, and these are all exactly the same dimensions that we see in the Expedition. That means we measured a phenomenal 31 inches up in the front seat during our rear-facing car seat test, and a lot of other clever little features too, like these sliding second-row seats, which means that you can free up more cargo space or legroom for third-row passengers. And speaking of car seats, I love the new tilting second row that allows you to access that third row even when you have a car seat installed. The third row, by the way, is the most comfortable that I've ever found in any vehicle that I've tested. We have an independent rear suspension in the back of the Navigator, which means there's a lot more leg room, even for full-size adults like myself, and there's headroom to spare too. And as a bonus, there are USB chargers back there for passengers to stay connected. Now, by the way, if you're drooling over some of the tech here in the second row, that entertainment system that we have here in our tester, they're a $2,350 option, at which point you might find that you're better off just using your iPad and calling it good. Now, there are 3 second row seating configurations that you can make in the Navigator, all for the same price as well. But in my opinion, only one of those options is the truly family-friendly choice. You can get this fancy center console thing like we have in our tester, which allows you to control the stereo from the second row and gives a storage bin like the one that we have between the two front seats as well. But it's got a lot of that scratch-prone piano black plastic that I was talking about, which is already actually showing wear with just 7,000 kilometers under the belt on this test vehicle. Also, unless you're a limo driver, who really wants the second row passengers to be controlling the stereo anyway? Now, there's also the option to go minivan style and have 2 captain seats in the second row with a pass-through going back to the third row. And that's the configuration that we had in the Expedition a few weeks ago. But that creates this big gap for groceries to just go flying through whenever you hit the brakes hard. So my choice would be the 3 traditional seats right across that second row. It gives you more passenger capacity, and when the seats are flipped up, it keeps groceries and family dogs contained to the back. It also gives you, when you flip those seats down, a totally flat load floor, and it means that you can have acres of flat cargo capacity back there when both the third and second row are down. And to flip these seats down is a total breeze in the Navigator too. The press of a button from the trunk drops them down for quickly reconfiguring your cargo zone, and with 1,627 liters behind the second row, our standardized trunk test barely made a dent in what this thing can haul around. And then if you really need to crank up the cargo capacity, there's the Navigator L. It's almost a foot longer in overall length, and while it doesn't actually affect third row legroom at all, it does nearly double the cargo capacity behind those third row seats. Here in this regular wheelbase Navigator, it actually is surprisingly tight for cargo space when you've got all 3 rows up. We had a hard time jamming our standardized trunk test back there, and while the $500 cargo tray option that we have here in our tester is good for making the most of the space that is there, it doesn't give you any extra space. So if you regularly have all 3 rows of seating filled up, that L option might make the most sense for you, but the extra room is going to add an extra $3,000 to your price tag as well. Well, the new Navigator sure looks good for 2018. It's got some great best-in-class features with fantastic capability and pretty darn impressive fuel economy too, given what a powerful, commanding truck this is. I do wonder if all this caviar that's been piled onto this thing would be starting to look a little bit rough around the edge after a few years on the road. And with a lot of similar features available in the Expedition at a much cheaper price, I found myself wandering back to that vehicle throughout our week of testing. So make sure to check out that video too if you're deciding between the two of them, and then you can make up your mind for yourself whether it's worth splashing out on the extra bells and whistles here in the Lincoln. And don't forget, you can always check out our Family Wheels report cards at familywheels.ca. It puts everything into bullet point form, and you can see all the vehicles that we've tested right there on the website. And the next time I see you for something completely different, it's the uber efficient new Honda Clarity. And we'll see how that one stacks up in a couple of weeks from now, right here on Family Wheels.